Perhaps tonight, as the world grows quiet and the shadows stretch long across your ceiling, you find yourself lying awake, eyes open, heart aching. The house that once echoed with laughter and whispered prayers now feels like a cathedral of silence. You used to kneel beside your child, guiding their small hands to fold in prayer, teaching them to speak the sacred words that once filled your own heart with hope. But now those same lips that once spoke, "Amen," mock everything holy. That same heart that once burned with innocence now seems cold to everything you hold dear. And you whisper into the darkness, "Where did I go wrong?" It's a question that has crossed oceans and centuries, a question that has lived in the hearts of countless mothers since time began. A question soaked in tears and sleepless nights. But what if I told you that this very moment, this ache that feels unbearable, is not a sign of your failure but a sacred invitation? Because this is exactly where Saint Teresa of Ávila wants to meet you. Teresa understood the agony of a mother's soul. Though she bore no children of her own, she carried thousands of souls in prayer. Nuns, priests, seekers, and wanderers who called her mother. And she watched many of them drift away. She knew what it was to love someone so deeply and still watch them walk toward darkness. She saw young nuns lose their fire for God. She saw once devout hearts grow cold. And in that helpless watching she discovered something holy, a truth that would change not only her own life, but the lives of countless mothers after her. She discovered that a mother's heartbreak is not proof of defeat, it is proof of love. And love, when offered to God, becomes the most powerful force in the universe. Maybe tonight your heart is breaking because your child, the one you carried, the one you prayed over, the one you believed would never turn away, has lost their way. You have tried talking, reasoning, pleading. You've written messages they never answer, prayed prayers that seem to vanish into silence. And now you wonder if God himself has gone quiet. But Teresa would whisper something to you through that silence. When you can no longer reach your child with words, reach them with your soul. Because intercession, true spiritual intercession, is not about convincing God to care. It is about joining him in his eternal desire to save. Teresa believed that when a mother prays with tears, she is standing beside the cross itself, sharing in the suffering of the one who never stops calling his children home. And perhaps tonight that is what your sleeplessness means. It is not punishment. It is participation. You are not being abandoned by God. You are being invited to stand beside him in the mystery of redeeming love. There is a kind of pain that breaks us open, not apart. A pain that doesn't destroy, it sanctifies. Teresa called this the dark night of the mother's soul, when faith feels absent and love feels unanswered, yet something deeper is happening beneath the silence. Because what if, right now, even as you grieve, God is already working in your child's heart in ways you cannot see? What if every tear you shed is watering a seed that will one day blossom into faith reborn? In the stillness of this night, Saint Teresa would ask you to do only one thing. Stop seeing your pain as a verdict and start seeing it as a vocation. The vocation of intercession. The sacred calling to become a bridge between heaven and earth. And as we walk through this journey together, you will learn, step by step, how your love, purified by surrender, can become the very instrument through which God performs his quiet miracles. But tonight, as you rest your weary heart, know this. Your tears are seen. Your prayers are heard. And your child, no matter how far they've gone, is not beyond the reach of divine mercy. Because heaven still listens to a mother's cry. Especially on nights like this. Morning comes slowly after a sleepless night. The world looks the same streets, the same sky, but inside something feels empty. You pour the coffee, sit in the quiet kitchen and stare at the chair your child used to fill. The laughter that once spilled across the table is now only an echo. And the ache returns. That hollow, wordless pain that makes you whisper again, "Where did I go wrong?" But Saint Teresa would gently take your hands, look into your tearful eyes and say, "You did not fail because your child wandered. You failed only if you stop loving." For Teresa, love was not a fragile feeling that disappears when it is rejected. It was a fire, divine, indestructible, capable of surviving even the coldest silence. She wrote that when love meets suffering, it becomes something holy. Because suffering exposes what love truly is. Not comfort, not reward, but sacrifice. Every mother who has loved deeply knows this. Love, when pure, always carries a cross. The moment you first held your child, you accepted that one day you might have to suffer for them, though you didn't yet know how. That's the hidden mystery written into every mother's heart, the willingness to bear pain for the sake of another soul. But here is the secret that Saint Teresa discovered. That pain is not punishment, it is participation. It means that your love is touching the cross, the very place where heaven and earth were reconciled. When Christ carried his cross, he wasn't just carrying wood. He was carrying every lost child, every broken relationship, every heart that cries out in the dark. And when your heart breaks for your child, you are sharing in that same divine burden. Teresa used to say that when a soul suffers for love, it becomes a living prayer. Your sighs, your sleeplessness, your tears, they are not wasted. They rise like incense before the throne of God. So tonight, instead of asking, "Where did I go wrong?" begin asking, "Lord, how can I love through this pain?" Because this is where redemption begins. Not in fixing, not in convincing, not in controlling, but in loving with surrender. Teresa knew how dangerous it is for a mother's heart to live in guilt. Guilt chains you to the past. Love opens you to grace. She once counseled a woman whose son had renounced his vows and left the monastery. The mother wept before her, saying she had prayed every day and yet her son only seemed to move farther away. Teresa listened silently, then said something that pierced through the woman's despair. "You have prayed for your son to change. Now begin praying for yourself, that your love may become pure enough for God to work through it." That was the turning point. Because transformation doesn't begin with the child. It begins with the heart that intercedes for them. You see, when we pray from fear, our prayers tremble. But when we pray from surrender, our prayers burn. And fire, divine fire, always finds its way to heaven. This is what Teresa meant when she spoke of the alchemy of love. The way pain, when united with prayer, becomes power. Not the kind of power that manipulates outcomes, but the power that moves heaven itself. So if you are listening to this with a heavy heart, feeling like you've lost your child to doubt, to anger, to the noise of the world, remember, you haven't lost your calling. You haven't lost your place in their story. You are still their bridge to God. And bridges are strongest when the storms rage. Tonight, when you kneel in prayer, imagine placing your child's name at the foot of the cross. Don't beg. Don't reason. Simply offer. Say, "Lord, I can't carry them anymore, but you can." And in that moment something shifts. You stop being a desperate parent trying to rescue a soul, and become a holy intercessor joining the Redeemer himself. Because when love meets the cross, miracles begin. Not always immediately, not always visibly, but always powerfully. Saint Teresa would remind you, the soul that surrenders its pain becomes the doorway through which grace enters the world. And that is where we go next, into the mystery of that doorway. For Teresa learned how to turn heartbreak into holy power, how to transform sorrow into prayer that heaven cannot ignore. In the next chapter, we'll step deeper into her secret, the revelation that changed everything about how she prayed for the souls who seemed lost beyond reach. But for now, take a breath. Let your tears fall if they need to. For in God's eyes, every tear is a testimony that you still love, and love is the beginning of every miracle. There was a night when Saint Teresa herself could no longer bear the silence. A young sister she had mentored, bright, devout, full of promise, had grown cold toward God. The same woman who once wept during prayer now rolled her eyes when the community knelt before the Blessed Sacrament. She laughed at faith. She dismissed holiness as illusion. And Teresa, who had loved her like her own daughter, felt utterly powerless. Every word of counsel fell flat. Every prayer seemed unanswered. And so one night, Teresa knelt alone in the dim chapel, the candles flickering against the stone walls, and cried out, "Lord, what more can I do?" The silence that followed was unbearable. Yet within that silence something began to stir, not in the air around her but in the depths of her soul. And she heard, not with her ears but with her spirit, a voice that said, "You are not called to change her heart. You are called to become the bridge through which my grace can reach her." Teresa froze. A bridge. She had spent her life trying to build arguments, to inspire, to persuade. But God was asking for something else. Not persuasion but participation. In that moment she understood something profound. Intercession is not about doing more. It is about becoming more. Becoming a vessel so surrendered that divine love can flow through without resistance. She realized that she had been praying for Sister Maria but not through love. She had been asking God to act, but still holding on to her own fear of failure. That night, Teresa laid her head on the cold floor before the tabernacle and whispered, Then Lord, let me be the bridge. Let my heart carry your love where mine cannot reach. Something broke open in her then, not her faith but her control. From that night onward she began to pray differently. She no longer begged for immediate results. She stopped pleading for visible signs. Instead she began offering herself, her thoughts, her pain, her tears, as material for grace to work with. And slowly she noticed a mystery unfolding. When she prayed from surrender rather than fear, peace entered her heart. And when peace entered her, it began to touch others, quietly, invisibly. Weeks turned into months, and one evening as the nuns gathered for prayer, Sister Maria, the one who had mocked all things sacred, knelt beside Teresa again. Tears filled her eyes. Without a word she whispered, "Mother, I want to believe again." Teresa never forgot that moment. She never forgot the lesson written into it. When love ceases to control and begins to trust, heaven moves. From then on she began teaching others what she had learned, the sacred art of intercession. Not empty repetition of prayers, not desperate bargaining with God, but a disciplined cooperation with grace. She taught that when someone you love turns away from faith, the path back is not through argument, but through alignment. Aligning your own soul so perfectly with God's will that His love can flow through you unimpeded. She began to call this the spiritual bridge, a living connection between heaven and the wandering soul. Teresa described it like this: when a soul intercedes with tears, heaven opens paths no human reasoning could ever build. Those around her began to notice the effect. People she prayed for, doubters, rebels, even enemies of the faith, began to soften, sometimes without ever knowing why. They described it later as a pull, a strange longing for something sacred they couldn't explain. And Teresa would smile quietly and say, "Grace always finds the bridge." She came to understand that the true power of prayer is not in the words themselves but in the heart that offers them. A mother's heart, Teresa said, when purified by pain and trust, becomes one of the strongest channels of divine mercy on earth. Maybe you too have tried everything: reasoning, pleading, warning. Maybe you've prayed until the words lost meaning. Maybe you've reached the edge of your strength and whispered, "God, I don't even know how to pray anymore." That is the perfect moment for heaven to begin. Because when your words end, your soul begins to speak, and heaven listens to that language best. Teresa's revelation was simple yet world-shattering. Prayer is not what you do. It's what you become. To intercede for your child is to let God shape your heart until it mirrors His own, patient, merciful, unstoppable in love. And this is where the miracle starts to take form. For Teresa discovered that heaven itself opens most fully at one particular moment. A moment so powerful that the angels bow in awe, a moment she called the gateway between earth and eternity. In the next chapter you will discover what she found there. The secret of the Eucharistic moment, when the name of a wandering child, spoken in faith, becomes a prayer that heaven cannot ignore. There exists a moment in every Mass that most people pass by without realizing its cosmic power. A few seconds that hold eternity within them. A heartbeat in which heaven bends so close to earth that angels tremble in awe. It is the moment of the elevation of the host. Saint Teresa discovered this mystery not in books but through anguish. There were days when even she felt her prayers bounce back, when silence from heaven pressed down like a weight. But one morning during Mass she felt something change. The priest lifted the consecrated host, the body of Christ, high above the altar. And in that instant Teresa's spirit seemed to open as though a veil had been torn away. She understood with burning clarity that this was no symbol, no ritual gesture to inspire devotion. It was the meeting point of infinity and flesh, the very intersection of divine mercy and human longing. She later wrote, "When Christ is lifted before us, the earth itself holds its breath. The same hands that created the stars make themselves small enough to be held by a priest. And in that moment, every soul who loves can speak directly into eternity." Teresa realized that this moment was the perfect time for intercession, the holiest doorway for a mother's love to reach the heart of God. From that day forward she began teaching mothers, fathers, anyone who wept for a wandering soul, to bring that soul's name to the altar. She would say, "When the host is raised, speak their name. Not with fear, not with desperation, but with calm surrender. Place their heart into His hands and step aside, for He knows what to do." Imagine it, the church filled with quiet reverence. The bells ring softly. The priest's hands rise. And as the white host gleams in the candlelight, you whisper your child's name, not begging, not bargaining, but offering. Jesus, this is my child. You love them more than I ever could. Bring them home. At that exact instant, heaven and earth are united in a pulse of divine life. Christ, truly present, body, blood, soul, and divinity, gazes upon the one whose name you offer. Your prayer is no longer just words. It becomes presence, carried into the eternal heart of God. Teresa said that when this is done with pure love, it is as if a thread of light shoots straight from the altar into the soul of the one being prayed for. That light might seem invisible, but it never disappears. It begins to move, to seek, to soften, to work quietly where human hands cannot reach. And mothers began to notice the results. Children who had refused to pray suddenly found themselves restless in the middle of the night, thinking of their childhood faith. Young men hardened by cynicism began to feel a strange nostalgia for peace. Daughters who had once mocked belief found themselves pausing before churches without knowing why. Teresa never called it magic. She called it divine law, the law of love meeting perfect presence. When perfect love speaks a name in the moment of perfect surrender, she wrote, grace must answer. But she also warned that this prayer cannot be rushed or forced. If you speak your child's name with anxiety, heaven hears your fear. If you speak it with surrender, heaven hears your faith. Because the Eucharist is not about control. It is about communion. So the next time you are at Mass and that sacred moment arrives, breathe deeply. Let your heart fall silent. And as the host is raised, imagine light flowing from Christ's heart into yours, and from yours into your child's. That light will go where you cannot. It will wait where you cannot. It will whisper in ways you never could. Teresa called this, the prayer that heaven cannot ignore. Not because it demands, but because it loves. And love, when united with the Eucharist, becomes unstoppable. She used to say that even if no visible change follows, something irreversible has already begun. A door has opened in the spiritual realm. A grace has been set in motion. And God's timing, though hidden, is already perfect. So if you walk out of Mass and still feel the ache, do not doubt. You have just touched eternity. You have spoken your child's name into the heart of divine mercy itself. And that prayer, whispered with faith during the elevation, will continue echoing in heaven long after the candles burn out and the church grows silent. Saint Teresa's discovery was not only a revelation, it was a revolution of the heart. She showed that ordinary love, when united with divine presence, becomes extraordinary power. And yet Teresa also knew that love sometimes needs a language deeper than words, a language spoken through tears. In the next chapter we will enter that sacred language. The mystery of tears that pray when the lips cannot, and the practice that transforms sorrow into supernatural intercession. There comes a point when words no longer help. You've said every prayer you know. You've pleaded, reasoned, bargained. And still silence. Your heart aches with a weight that language can't carry. So you stop speaking, and begin to weep. Saint Teresa knew that place well, that sacred space beyond words, where only tears can speak. She once wrote, "When words fail, tears become the voice of the soul." It happened to her one night as she prayed for a young woman whose mother had come to her in desperation. The daughter had turned from faith, abandoned every moral compass, and was living in ways that broke her mother's heart. Teresa began to pray as she always did, but this time no words came. Only tears. At first she thought it was weakness, the exhaustion of too many sleepless nights. But as the tears fell, she sensed something different, something sacred. She realized these were not her tears alone. They were God's. In that moment she understood that sometimes the Holy Spirit borrows our tears to express divine sorrow. A sorrow full of mercy, not judgment. From then on, Teresa began teaching something she called the prayer of tears, a holy surrender that goes beyond speech. She taught mothers to stop apologizing for their weeping, to stop hiding their tears as signs of lack or doubt. Do not dry them too quickly, she said. Let them fall before God. They are liquid prayers. But Teresa also gave this practice a form, a simple, beautiful ritual that she called the 7-day light of mercy. She told mothers to light a single white candle, white for purity, for hope, for the light that never goes out, and place it before an image of Christ. If possible, before the Blessed Sacrament. For 7 consecutive days, they were to light this candle and allow whatever tears came to flow freely. No need to speak. No need to control. Just let the tears pray. Because she said each tear is a seed of grace, and when offered sincerely, it waters the soil of the soul being prayed for. On the first day the candle's flame might flicker uncertainly, like your faith. By the third day doubt begins to soften. By the fifth, peace begins to settle like quiet dew. And by the seventh the heart is no longer frantic but surrendered. Something mysterious happens when a mother cries for her child before God. The tears don't fall to the ground, they fall into eternity. Teresa called it divine exchange. When a mother offers her tears to God, He returns them as grace to her child. She told mothers that their tears were not only healing their children, they were purifying their own hearts. Because each drop washed away fear, pride, and the illusion of control. This is not sentimental poetry. It is spiritual warfare disguised as tenderness. Teresa said that every tear shed in faith builds a wall of light around the soul being prayed for, a fortress no darkness can penetrate. And the white candle? It is not just a symbol. It is a declaration that hope still burns, that love still believes, that surrender is stronger than despair. 7 days, 7 flames, 7 prayers without words. For 7 days heaven listens. Many who followed this practice began to see small signs. A message from a child who hadn't written in months. A brief moment of softness in a hardened voice. A question about God whispered without mockery. And yet Teresa always reminded them. The greatest miracle is not what happens in the child. The greatest miracle is what happens in you. Because these 7 days reshape the soul. They transform a grieving mother into a spiritual warrior. Gentle, radiant, unstoppable. When the final candle burns out and the wax melts down to nothing, do not fear the darkness. That empty space is sacred. It means you have given everything. Teresa said, when a candle dies, the light does not vanish. It becomes invisible, but it continues to shine in heaven. Your tears are not weakness. They are power. Your love, though broken, is not failing. It is becoming divine. So let the tears come. Let the candle burn. Let your heart learn heaven's language. Because in those tears you are not alone. You are praying the way Christ Himself prayed in Gethsemane, not with eloquence but with tears that reach the Father's heart. And those tears, offered in love, will one day return to you, transformed into joy. There comes a season when even faith feels hollow. You've lit the candles. You've whispered the name during Massachusetts. You've prayed through tears. And still, nothing. Your child grows colder. Your prayers feel smaller. And heaven, it seems, is silent. You look toward the crucifix and whisper, Lord, where are you? The silence answers only with your own heartbeat. Saint Teresa knew this silence better than anyone. She called it divine darkness, the shadowed space between petition and miracle, where God hides not because He is absent, but because He is working too deeply to be seen. There was a time when she prayed every day for a young man whose soul seemed utterly lost. For 2 years she offered masses, candles, tears, and saw no change. Each day her faith felt a little thinner, her hope a little dimmer. Until one night, as she prayed in the stillness of her cell, something happened. No voice. No vision. Just a quiet awareness that God was nearer than ever. And within that silence she heard in her heart these words. My child, silence is not absence. Delay is not denial. You see nothing because I am preparing everything. In that moment, Teresa saw with her spirit what she could never have seen with her eyes. She saw prayers, her own and those of countless mothers, as threads of light weaving around the souls they were offered for. Each prayer formed a tiny point of radiance, and together they became a shield, a network of grace encircling the wandering soul. It was then she understood. Every sincere prayer, every whispered name, every tear shed in faith, creates real light in the unseen world. That light doesn't vanish when you see no result. It gathers, waiting for the perfect moment when the heart you pray for becomes just soft enough for grace to enter. Teresa said, when we intercede for someone, we are not convincing God to love them. We are cooperating with His love that never stopped. The young man she had prayed for, silent for years, suddenly wrote to her one day. His words were simple, I don't know why, but I want to come home. And Teresa smiled because she knew the light had finally broken through. She later told a friend, God is never silent. We are simply too impatient to hear the language He is speaking. And that is what this season of silence means for you too. Your prayers have not been ignored. Your love has not been wasted. They are working in dimensions you cannot yet touch. Sometimes the first sign of grace is not peace but restlessness. Your child may seem more unsettled than ever, more irritable, more lost. But that, Teresa said, is often the soul's first stirring under the weight of grace. The heart must first grow uncomfortable with darkness before it can long for light. So do not despair when the signs seem backward. When your child grows restless, when their choices no longer satisfy them, when they begin to question what they once mocked, know that heaven is already moving. Teresa taught that this is the most delicate moment in the entire journey. It is the time when faith must become pure, not the faith that depends on results, but the faith that rests in God's character alone. To believe, she said, is to love in the dark. Keep praying. Keep lighting the candles. Keep speaking their name during the elevation. Not with anxiety now but with quiet confidence. Because you are no longer fighting for a miracle. You are walking with one. Your faith has entered the invisible battlefield where grace wins its greatest victories. Not through force but through endurance. And one day when you least expect it there will be a moment. A soft voice, a small gesture, a question that opens a door. And you will realize that the silence was never empty. It was full of God. Saint Teresa used to tell her sisters, "The longest night always ends in dawn." And that dawn is closer than you think. In the next chapter we will step into that dawn, into the sacred moment when the child begins to return, when grace finishes what love began, and when a mother finally understands that the true miracle was never only her child's conversion, but her own transformation. It happens quietly, not with trumpets or miracles in the sky, but in a single fragile moment of grace. A phone call, a message, a soft tone in a voice that once burned with anger. Your child, the one you thought was lost forever, reaches out. Maybe they don't speak of faith yet. Maybe they only ask how you're doing. But something in their words feels different. Gentler. And for the first time in a long while hope doesn't hurt. Saint Teresa called this moment, the first dawn of returning grace. It is the point when heaven's work begins to surface in the visible world. When the light that's been moving unseen beneath the soil finally breaks through. You may notice small things first. A question asked without mockery. A quiet pause when you mention prayer. A visit that lasts longer than usual. Don't rush it. Don't fill the silence with explanations or proofs. Just love. Calmly, freely, without agenda. Teresa warned her spiritual daughters. When grace begins to move, step back. The same hands that planted the seed must not dig it up to see if it's growing. This is the sacred waiting. The gentle reverence of letting God finish His work. Because when a soul begins to return to God, the parent's role changes. You are no longer the warrior on your knees. You become the witness of resurrection. Just as the father in the parable didn't chase his son into the far country, but waited at the gate with open arms, so must you now wait, not with fear but with readiness to rejoice. And when that moment comes, when your child looks at you with eyes softened by something new, when they speak of church or prayer not with irony but with longing, let every hurt, every disappointment, every memory of pain fall away. Teresa said, "The soul that forgives without condition cooperates perfectly with God's mercy." Welcome them as if heaven itself were walking through your door. Because in a way it is. Your child's return is not just about their soul. It's about God revealing His nature through your story, showing that His love never gives up, never grows tired, never stops calling. And as you sit across from them, seeing the peace in their eyes, you begin to understand something that words could never teach. All those nights of tears, all the masses, all the candles, they were not just prayers for your child. They were God's way of transforming you. The mother who once cried in fear has become a mother of faith. The woman who once begged for miracles has become one. You've learned what Teresa learned. That true intercession is not about changing another person. It's about allowing love to change you until God can move freely through your heart. Now your faith is not fragile anymore. It is forged, quiet, unshakable. And this strength, this peace that has taken root in you, is the gift you will carry into the lives of others. Teresa believed that those who have witnessed God's mercy firsthand carry a sacred duty. To become bearers of hope for those still weeping in the dark. There are countless mothers right now lying awake in the same pain you once knew, whispering the same question, "Where did I go wrong?" To them your story will be a light. Because now you know, the darkness never had the final word. You've seen the truth. Love joined with faith and surrender can move the heavens. And if your child's return feels like the end, know that it is not. It is the beginning of a new calling, to live as a witness of God's endless mercy, and to remind the world that no one is ever too far gone for love to find them. Saint Teresa would smile at you now, the same smile she gave to every soul who learned through pain how to trust through love. And she would say, "You are no longer just a mother. You are a bridge between heaven and earth." Let that truth settle deep in your heart. Let it fill the silence where once there was fear. And as you step forward into this new dawn, carry with you the wisdom of Saint Teresa, timeless, radiant, alive. If her voice has touched your soul, if her teachings have reminded you that even pain can be holy, then come, walk further with us. Because there is more to learn, more to uncover, more of heaven to discover in the hidden places of the heart. Subscribe to Timeless Wisdom of Saint Teresa, and let her guidance continue to meet you in every dark night, every prayer, every moment when love needs light. For her words are not ancient, they are eternal. And tonight, as the morning breaks, so is your hope.